What up, guys? What up, guys? OtterPop here. I am back at Genshin Impact for the first time in, well, a while, but I feel like that kind of happens a bunch. I will talk about what we're going to be talking about in this episode regarding, writing, writing lessons and stuff like that. But first, I have this to do.
This is Barbara, the deaconess of the church.
Got it.
She is here to retrieve the holy lyre to Hamel.
Got
May
it.
the Animal Archon protect you.
About that?
I'm not really in a position to speak compared to our acting Grand Master, but I still want to thank you all on behalf of all of Mondstadt for your assistance.
But of course.
Fortunately, everything was resolved peacefully. I can't imagine how an all-out war between the military and the dragon would have ended.
Yeah.
Now the Fatui have no choice but to keep their mouths shut.
Seriously.
They must be annoyed that things didn't turn out as planned for them. This time, they even
Frick
lost
the
their
Fatui.
best excuse to pressure the Knights of Favonius. Diplomatically speaking, they gained nothing. And on the contrary, simply proved just how vexatious they can be.
Vexatious, that's a big word.
Sounds like quite the story. So, did you bring the Holy Lyre with you? We cannot
Think
ask you to keep
so.
defending the lyre forever. The Seneschal has been pressing me for a while now.
Did I?
We, did bring it with us. It's a little...
Oh, don't worry. I'm not here to collect rent. The church has always received special funding.
Hmm? Yeah, it's a little broken.
The Holy Lyre! Lord Barbados! Even if I atone for these sins for the rest of my life, it would still not be enough.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Oh, give it here.
And there you have it.
How could this Holy Lyre, but how?
Huh? Let Paimon see!
No. I don't know how you managed to fix it, but you'll never touch the lyre again.
He will eventually.
We really should get going. That trick I used to repair the Holy Lyre.
Oh, is it?
I mean, the magic I used isn't going to hold forever, you know.
It's an illusion?
Don't get bored!
Oh my gosh. Venti. I mean, I can't be surprised. It's still very funny though. Oh, what? Oh, who is you? What? Who is you? Wait, is that... No. Really? Seiki!
At last, Mondstadt's rodent ruler in the flesh.
La Senora.
Scurrying through the streets
Fatui.
looking for leftovers? Mondstadt calls this a god?
Resident rodent beats invasive vermin.
Oh,
Don't you dare speak back
what?
to me, insolent bard.
Don't mess with a god.
How impotent you've become.
That smirk you wear looks out of place. Did you steal it from your master's face?
Ooh, take it off.
Should have held your tongue. So, this is a gnosis. Wouldn't
A
be caught
what?
dead wearing this ugly thing in public.
Beauty is a waste when the beholder has no taste.
Oh, Venti, you're still rhyming even when this is happening to you? Oh, jeez. No. No, don't tell me that he got
We have
killed.
what we came here for. Come, before our dear Favonian friends arrive. Leave nothing for them to find.
What the hell just happened?
Honorary Knight, you're awake.
Yeah? Yeah, is Venti okay?
I wouldn't say he's alright, exactly.
But he's alive, right? Please tell me
I
he's
found
alive.
you lying unconscious outside the cathedral and used my elemental powers to heal you. That bard awakened first, but strangely, my healing powers had almost no effect on him.
How about that?
This is the first time I've encountered such a patient. But he just said, it's completely normal, and then got up and left the cathedral.
Oh my god, Venti, you scared me.
Where'd he go? The symbol of Mondstadt's hero. That's what he said. I wanted to stop him, but Jean, I mean, Master Jean, said to let him leave. How strange.
Yeah, Jean
Paimon
understands.
remembers Venti healing under that tree before.
Like the big one?
It's probably due to the connection between Windrise and the Animal Archon. Master Jean has figured it out as well, but we can't tell Barbara.
Yet no. Wowzers. Dude, I'm just glad that, Venti is okay. I was scared, man. I was so scared for him. Oh, what is that? Wait, that could be no, I haven't accepted any commissions yet, but I probably could. So I'm gonna go ahead and work on commissions and head towards Venti's location. But while I'm doing that, I will also mention exactly what today's episode is going to be related to writing and writing lessons, and it's a good one. I'm going to be focusing on character creation today, and I will be using a lot of examples. Okay, well, I say a lot, but like 4 primary ones, like in different facets of those 4 primary examples. So yeah, I am going to be focusing on character creation today because that is definitely a big part of stories, because characters are the lens through which any fictional story is told, and that includes even games, kind of like Genshin Impact. But the thing is, characters are not just what the story is or what makes them, or what the story makes them into. Characters, like real people, are very complicated with their own fears, their own desires, weaknesses, history, all that good jazz. So, I mean, to start off, believable characters, the characters that we typically follow in any given story, are unique, but grounded as well. They carry strengths and flaws, and often they're very multidimensional, or at least they should have some kind of multidimensionality to them. Not necessarily a lot, but even a little can be very good. Then that kind of begs the question, what is necessary to create a character? So that list is technically not definitive, but I think that there are a lot of very important characteristics to consider for stuff like that. What do I think are the important characteristics to consider? Not necessarily definitive, not necessarily required, but well, maybe some degree of required. One is appearance and clothing, well, appearance and or clothing. Another is, backstory and history, even if it's sparse. Personality and traits is obviously a very big one, and one that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, which I think is very important, motivations and goals. I want to talk to Venti.
The wind amongst the branches is good. I love the way it smells.
So what got taken from you, Venti? Is it something of yours?
I said the exact same thing last time. Why do I only say these things when I'm down on my luck?
No, I don't like seeing Venti all depressed.
So you noticed.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't something I'm meant to discuss with ordinary people. But I suppose I can let you in on the secret. As you know, visions are external magical foci that only a small minority of people possess.
I have one.
They use these visions to channel elemental power. In truth, every wielder of a vision is one who can attain godhood and ascend to Celestia. We call such people allogenes.
Okay.
Paimon's never heard of them before.
That's because this is a secret that only Archons are privy to. We don't need primitive tools like visions. Instead, each Archon has an internal magical focus that resonates directly with Celestia itself, known as a gnosis.
I think I got it.
It's just a glowing glass ball I carry around to avoid suspicion.
Huh.
So who was that nasty woman who sent Paimon flying and stole your gnosis?
Her name is Signora. number 8 of the Harbingers.
Harbingers.
She and the rest of the Harbingers have been given godlike executive authority by the Tsaritsa of Snezhnaya, and with it, strength surpassing that of other mortals.
Oh boy.
The Tsaritsa of Snezhnaya? Isn't that...
Indeed. She is one of the 7. The Tsaritsa who reigns from the Zeppeljärni Palace, and the one person that the Fatui Harbingers all answer to.
Okay. I feel like I'm still missing some crucial information. Well, okay, maybe not crucial, but maybe I just haven't played this in so long I'm missing context.
The 7 don't always get along well, but still. I never thought that she would plot to steal another Archon's Gnosis.
Oh, wait, he's talking about the 7. He's talking about, like, the 7 archons, the 7 gods, essentially, of which he is one. He is the god of Anemo / wind. He is Barbados. Yeah.
How should I put this? 500 years ago, I knew her well. But I can't say the same is true now. You see, a certain catastrophe happened 500 years ago, and after that, she cut off all ties with me. But we can save discussion of the Cryo Archon and the Fatui for another day.
Okay, so the Tsaritsa is... either is the Cryo Archon, or somehow connected to it.
If you seek the rest of the 7, many difficulties lie ahead of you still. You should head for Mondstadt's neighboring nation of Liyue.
Ooh, am I
Geo
actually about to head to
Archon
Liyue?
reigns there, unlike me, administrates his entire region personally.
Oh, Liyue is ruled by the Geo Archon, and like where the Fatui and the Tsaritsa are, where the Fatui are, and Snezhnaya is where the Cryo Archon reigns. I thought it was the Electric Archon, but I guess it was the Cryo. Okay, so Liyue is guarded by the Geo Archon.
He only descends once every year to give his divine predictions, which set the direction for Liyue for the rest of that year.
Even so, it sounds like he works much harder than a certain someone.
I mean, given Venti's personality and his desire for his people in Mondstadt, it makes sense.
In any case, this year's
Really?
rite of dissension is soon to begin. If you miss it, you'll just have to wait another year.
What? Oh, why didn't you tell us before? Well, then bye. We're going.
I guess so.
Windborn Outlander.
You mean me?
Yep. Traveler. As you set off on your journey once again, you must remember that the journey itself has meaning.
I hear the music in the
The
background.
birds of Tevat, the songs in the cities, the Tsaritsa, her Fatui and the monsters, they are all part of your journey. The destination is not everything. So before you reach the end, keep your eyes open. Use the chance to take in the world around you.
I understand.
Great. So, that's that for the Anemo Archon's admonishments. Back to Venti time.
You're something else, Venti.
If you want to chat, now's the time. A bard stays not always in a single climb.
That Dvalin.
Up till the end, Dvalin remembered his duty as one of the 4 winds.
Oh.
As such, I don't intend to forcibly strip him of that duty and force my ideals of freedom onto him. I just hope that Dvalin will be able to choose for himself and understand what freedom is.
Yeah.
Before I became an Archon, I too was taught the meaning of freedom in this way by a friend. If you want to chat, now's the time. A bard stays not always in a single climb. As I said before, vision wielders are known as allogenes and may ascend to Celestia.
Of which I am one. I'm pretty sure.
A gnosis is a higher order nexus of elemental manipulation and is emblematic of an Archon's status as one of the 7. But as for which of the 7 took your brother, I'm sorry, I don't know.
Wait, are we assuming that one of the seven archons is the one who is at the very beginning who took my brother? If I'm remembering her design a little bit, like if she is actually an archon, she could be the fire archon. As far as I know, we really only know anything about the Geo, the Cryo archons, and maybe the electric archon, and of course the wind or the Anemo. Sorry. But in terms of the other archons, that would be the fire, the pyro, the hydro, and I forget what the plant was. I forget what that was referred to as.
Wait. As one of the 7, I'm not clear of suspicion yet either, am I?
Yeah, we've known you long enough to trust you.
We're a great team indeed. Say, once you find your brother, how would you like to become one of the new 4 winds?
What?
You don't seem too into it. Hey, Toon Div Bard, if being one of the 4 winds means free food, you can consider Paimon.
I don't know about
If you
that.
want to chat, now's the time. Well then, best be off to Liyue. If the dissension ritual you failed to tally, then another year you must dally.
Okay, there better not be a time aspect to this. Alright. So oh my gosh, that's still the prologue, Act 3? Okay, now we're in chapter... Oh, it's only available from chapter 20. I need 3 adventure ranks. I need to complete 3 adventure ranks in order to do that. Oh my god. 3 or 4. Oh my dear Lord in heaven, I have so much work ahead of me before I can even go to Liyue. Okay, well... Okay, I'm definitely not going to be going to Liyue in this particular episode, but maybe in the next or the following. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I clearly have some work to do. And in addition to, like, you know, the writing lessons I'm giving out. Rumor has it that people who have ascended to Celestia have also witnessed the same helix-shaped divine ladder that can be seen within visions. Venturing out of the universe and down to the abyss are the same in that both are braving the dark unknown. Fair enough. Alright, I'm gonna have to do some work. Ooh. Raging Vortex. Wait, what? Oh, Uprising Whirlwind. Increases energy recharge by 16%. Ooh. Lovely. Oh, that's right. I almost completely forgot. I ended up making some wishes and got this lovely individual. She's a Hydro... What? Oh, she's a Hydro Spearmaster. Nice. Alright, so I've talked a little bit about what kinds of things I believe are important in any given character. Well, primarily prominent ones. And the first I talked about was, you know, character, like appearance / clothing. One of the first things that people often think about, or at least, you know, professional, like, you know, writers and artists and stuff like that, when they first think about how they want to design a character, they think about the silhouettes. The thing about silhouettes is that sometimes your character's design can be so unique you can just tell it apart from a silhouette alone. This isn't a requirement, of course, but it is something to think about. It is definitely a good suggestion. Look at something like, I don't know, Mickey Mouse from Disney. Like, he has one of the most iconic appearances out there, and he could easily be set apart just by his silhouette alone. Like, he has that much of a unique and recognizable appearance. Appearances can be very simple, but simultaneously they can also be very complex. I actually discussed a little bit about that kind of topic in my what can you learn about a character based off their clothing lesson. I believe it was like episode 8, maybe, something like that. But like, even from a basic perspective, you know, what is your character's, like, you know, thought I heard a sizzle, like a lightning or something like that. Weird. But like, you know, your character, like, maybe what's their hair color, what are their eyes, what's their stature like, maybe they have certain body language mannerisms, clothes if they happen to wear it. Not saying that your characters are gonna be, like, they're supposed to be naked or anything like that, but sometimes they're, like, you know, certain species, animals and stuff like that, that just may not necessarily wear clothing kind of deal. It's like, your character can have a lot of, like, you know, speaking from an appearance perspective at the very least, your character can have a lot of, you know, ordinary traits, but it's the combination of those various traits that can give them potentially a unique, memorable, and or easily identifiable appearance. So I mentioned way earlier that, like, you know, I would probably use, like, you know, 4 primary examples, some of which may be familiar to people, one in particular which may not necessarily be, but I thought it would be good to use as like an example and a basis of sorts. So one of the first things that comes to mind whenever I think of appearances is, say, like, Lord of the Rings. And I am primarily speaking about the movie version.
What's the hurry?
Or movie versions, not necessarily the written ones. Oh, that is pretty. Think of the protagonist, Frodo Baggins. He doesn't really have a unique appearance, but he does have a memorable one. Again, in terms of the movies, I mean, he's got a short stature. He's got the hairy, bare feet that already cement him as a hobbit, essentially. He's got that thick, curly black hair, along with, at least for most of the movies, his signature like green elven cloak and his brown and tan shire underclothes. But all of that in combination is what makes his appearance so like memorable. Another example, which this is actually the first time I'm using this example, but I have actually been thinking about it a lot lately. My partner introduced this to me, was The Expanse, and again, I will primarily be using the TV series version. If you don't know, The Expanse is basically like a sci-fi futuristic space odyssey, essentially, but it focuses pretty much entirely on our solar system. It actually takes a really unique stance in terms of like space sci-fi stories, and in terms of how they go. But pretty much the primary protagonist of that entire series is James Holden. His character doesn't really have a remarkable appearance, or like is wholly or a very unique one, especially when in comparison with like say Frodo, in either the book or the TV series actually. But this makes sense in his case. He holds the position of captain of a space vessel known as the Rocinante. He captains a fairly small crew, even if it does change a little bit every now and then. But in terms of his appearance, it kind of, like, both in terms of like his physical appearance and like say his clothing, it makes sense that it's not exactly unique, because at least in terms of the Expanse universe, most clothing is like mass produced in the solar system, as anything more than that is considered a luxury that spacefaring individuals just don't have the use or don't have the money for. I'd say Holden probably does have the money for, but he doesn't necessarily have the use for, because it's not about appearances and whatnot. Okay, I should not have done that. It's not really about appearances in that particular storyline. It's more about people, what people do and why, kind of thing. I've mentioned some pretty popular like franchises out there, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about Genshin Impact, since I'm actually playing this game. So Lumine, which is her character's actual name, based on my research, does have a unique appearance in both silhouette and like full-on detail. The longer hair tassels around her hair, the baby blue flowers, the short blonde hair, has some slight uniqueness already, but her outfit does as well. I mean, and this is a battle outfit too, but I mean, it's got a very like open and flowing form, no matter like how you look at it. White, pale blue trimmed clothing. The long scarf-like garment, I think, is probably one of the most notable parts of her appearance. When it wraps around her neck and then it kind of extends far back, kind of past her dress, but it has these unique designs on it as well. She's got the arm braces and like the arm and leg like sort of coverings, but they're definitely uniquely designed. So I say both in silhouette and in full detailed appearance that she has a very unique design that I think could readily be recognizable by anybody who likes this franchise, who know, or even if they know of it, they may potentially know just her silhouette alone. The last character that I'm going to mention is actually one of my own, because again, I think it's important to like include my own stories a little bit to give a little bit of reference. Plus, if you think about it, it gives it a little bit of promotion too. And I've actually talked about this before, but I am going to be talking about my my comic character. Oh, that is pretty. Oh, I could screenshot that. That right there. That is a great screen capture. That's pretty. That's very pretty. Admittedly, a lot of my wolves in that comic don't really have a unique appearance and silhouette only. That's not always true, but in this case it is most definitely true. Like, my characters don't usually have a unique appearance and silhouette, but there are other ways in which they do have unique appearances. And I think Luruk is definitely one of them. A lot of my characters from the Hunters comic definitely have unique appearances, especially because there are so many different colors. But you know, there's a world full of like wild wolves, essentially, like normal wild wolves. Laruk is not one of them. She is anything but normal. She's basically got gray fur. She's got a bunch of silver stripes on her back, silver stripes on her muzzle, and on the top of her head. She has black paws, and the tip of her tail is also black. And she also has these bright yellow, okay, not bright yellow eyes, but definitely very saturated yellow eyes. So silhouette, not very unique, not very impressive. If anything, it's kind of normal for, you know, any wolf character, really, whether you're looking at my comic or otherwise. But in terms of actual design, no, it is wholly unique. I think it is very easily identifiable. Yeah, relating to the summary of like character appearances and stuff, is that it should be unique in a sense. It doesn't have to be like random or bizarre or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But it should be unique enough in terms of its combination of traits to be like recognizable. Very. Ooh, neat. Now let's talk about the second aspect that I mentioned, which arguably might require a bit more finagling and thought. So appearance and or clothing is one of the first things I think should be prevalent with, you know, character creation. But the second thing, which I think is arguably a bit more important, is their history and their backstories. Their history and their backstories basically, I mean, I'm sure everyone could guess. It explains why and who they are as of the start of their story or their introduction, essentially. In some cases, character backstories can be very simple and can just explain why a character is the way they are, even if it's a couple of simple events. Some backstories, though, can most definitely be a lot more complex, and a little bit more defining of the character that, you know, can even continue on into the main storyline you're writing by directly affecting how the characters act. And the story at hand, again, does have an effect on a character. It could be as big as, you know, saving the world or ending a centuries-old conflict or something like that. But it could also be as small as, you know, saving your personal business, your family business, or, like, you know, ending a toxic relationship or something like that. Different stories have different effects on characters in terms of, like, you know, how big or small they are. But different stories have different effects. But, you know, different stories can have different effects on characters depending on, one, what story is trying to be told, two, the character's world, characters is in plural, like, you know, the world that all of your characters are in, and three, the view of each of the characters of their world. Here's something important to consider as well about, like, you know, backstories, is that backstories don't, and many times shouldn't, be brought up all at once, especially early on. If it's important or relevant, you know, little bits of backstory information can come out when it's needed, you know, often in maybe these little short bursts or something like that, whether it's for the sake of the reader or the character, even both, because sometimes there's information about the backstory that even the character themselves doesn't know. More often than not always, but more often than not, backstory information is known by the character, but it just isn't not known to the reader. But you don't want to info dump on people. People do not like being info dumped on. They like having that little bit of intrigue and mystery when they're trying to, you know, say, figure out characters. Hi. Let's again use the exact same, like, you know, stories and characters that I was talking about earlier in terms of character appearances and stuff like that. So like Lord of the Rings, you got Frodo Baggins. He's the protagonist. His backstory is simply he lived a very normal, if not slightly adventurous, life as a hobbit. He lived his whole life in the Shire, most notably with his uncle. There was an accident that claimed his parents at a young age, so his uncle took care of him for a significant portion of his life. But he grew up to be very, like, you know, kind and compassionate towards others. I mean, just look at his best friend, if you think about it. He also ended up being very scholarly thanks to his uncle's influence, which, again, other characters can have serious impact on other characters. Characters can have impact on other characters growing up for, like, their backstories and stuff like that. But, I mean, he was very clearly fascinated by a manner, a host of very interesting things, including, Elvish culture, maps, and adventures in general. Interests which Gandalf specifically calls out as unusual for a hobbit. So that already sets him apart as being a very different kind of individual from, say most hobbits. Using the Expanse as an example for character information and backstories, we can still go to James Holden. So he grew up on a futuristic Earth with a very large family. It's one of those he lives in a society essentially where multiple people can contribute to his DNA, more than two. I mean, I want to say it was I don't know, half a dozen or something like that contributed to his actual DNA for his birth. I'm not entirely sure how it works. I just know that it does. So don't ask me specifics on that. I don't really know. But he was very familiar with farm life and, keeping a close-knit family with high moral values, essentially. He joined the military unit of Earth's United Nations Army. He served in space vessels for a time. He was dishonorably... Oh, hello. Yeah, he was dishonorably discharged from the army. He disobeyed a missile launch order based on unverified information, and that got transported to a shuttle vessel that was essentially transporting ice, which is the primary resource out in space. Ice equals water for places outside of Earth, between Saturn and one of its moons, so the people living off Earth could have the necessary water to survive. And that's essentially, right after that is basically where the story starts. After he's been on that ice freight for quite a few years, I believe. I would talk a little bit about Genshin Impact, and Lumine's character, but Lumine's character is meant to serve as a bit more of a conduit for the story. So it's Lumine's character is meant to serve a bit more as a conduit for the story, rather than being an actual kind of character herself. She does have her own traits, certainly, but not really something that I could use too much. But what I can do is actually talk about Amber's character, because she is a pretty substantial character within Genshin Impact, but she's a much better example to use in terms of what I'm talking about in terms of, backstories and history. But yeah, so regarding Amber's personality, I did have to look a little bit of this up because, I needed to use somebody else besides Lumine, and I figured that Amber would be a great example regardless. But her backstory is actually kind of interesting because she did have a grandfather whom she was very close with. Not only was she close with her grandfather, but I believe her grandfather, if I was finding the research information correctly, which I believe I was, her grandfather was actually the founder of the Outrider group within the Knights of Favonius. Like she is currently, she is an Outrider. Unfortunately, he did disappear some years before this story begins. And, despite the Outriders becoming obsolete, because Amber is currently the last Outrider as of right now, she was determined to stand on her own feet and become an Outrider herself, to protect her home, but B, so that she could also maybe find hope of locating her grandfather one day. No, I can't just, not mention any of my... What is that? I'm gonna find out what that is in just a moment, because... Anyways, can I actually talk about... I keep interrupting myself constantly. Let me actually talk about my comic. So, in terms of protagonist Larouk's backstory, she was essentially abandoned as a very young pup, due to her strange smell and her strange appearance. It still affects her throughout the story and directly led to her lack of confidence in herself even before the story started. She survived on her own for months, though kind of barely, even until the beginning of the story, through a combination of luck and superior senses that on a number of occasions allowed her to get away from a lot of potentially hostile situations. Where are you going? Where are you going? What? Where are you floating? Appearance and clothing are important. History and backstories are also very important. Another thing that I definitely like to talk about are character personalities, which I feel like people are generally a lot more familiar with. That's not to say it's simple, though. Personalities can often be very complex and multidimensional. kind of, you know, as they should be. I knew it. I knew it was going to give me a gust of wind. Let's see if it does exactly what I think it does. Oh. Okay, well, I'm going to go to that eventually, but first, I need to get to this thing. Okay, let's see if I can do something about... Well, let's see. Not if I can do something about it, but let's see if I can, like, interact with this somehow. Can I just like float right into it or something? Is it gonna do something? Ooh, warp drive. Whoa, where am I going? Ayo? Where am I? I'm all the way out here. Uh-huh. So yeah, like, again, personalities are often, you know, they're often very complex and multidimensional. Strengths and flaws also make them who they are. But something to consider is that, you know, personality traits should perhaps be, you know, grounded in a way that makes sense for the character and to the reader. Well, this is the Spiral Abyss. Spiral Abyss. Ooh. Grand underground corridor which leads to an unknown spiral constructed by a great empire that is long. Okay. Thanks for not letting me finish that. Rude. When a character deals cryo damage, it will be counted. When the count reaches 4, a shockwave will be unleashed at the opponent's location. Oh. Pyro damage increased by 75%. Ooh. I think actually that she would be good to use. I know I'm using basically the same characters, but that's okay. What? She's actually got a really good move. Like a really good special move.
You're in for a little
Ooh. Damn, I still managed to get longer than 90 seconds onto that, huh? Oh boy. Can I just exit this Spiral Abyss? Cause damn, that took a lot out of me. Let's go ahead and get right back into it, shall we? We were talking about character personalities. I think I only kind of just started talking about, like, you know, how complex and multidimensional they are and how they need, like, strengths and flaws and stuff like that. Something else to consider about character personalities, too, is, like, you know, skill sets. Like, depending on the story and or the world, characters may already have or need to learn skill sets that correlate to or impact on the personality of the character itself. Where am I going? Oh boy.
Freeze! Cool it!
Okay, there we go. Hey, so Cristo. Sure, use original resin? I don't know. I don't know if it was worth it, but I mean, it certainly helped. I think. Okay, let's actually get back to the topic at hand. I still feel like I have a lot to go through, and I've been focusing way too much on the battles, especially the unique ones that I haven't really experienced yet so far. I think I was talking about, like, you know, character skill sets, and what they may already have or need in order to survive in their world. And again, it sometimes can depend on, like, the world that they exist in. So, like, you know, characters that are used to space travel may need skills related to, like, mechanics or scientific analysis, technology, mathematics, that kind of stuff. Characters that live in a more, like, primitive environment may need skills related to, like, you know, hunting, foraging, farming, navigation. Characters that are living in a world, like, thriving with magic may need skills related to, you know, studying, storytelling, combat, imagination.
That was unexpected.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, maybe I should just, I'm just gonna teleport here at the very least, because I've definitely been freaking up. This is gonna sound like a specific one, but I just kind of thought about it when I was going through my own stories. But like, characters who were from poor communities, who were thrust into like, big fancy environments, may need skills related to, like socializing, clothes making, music, diplomacy. Like, it depends on the story, it depends on the character, it depends on the world. The world is definitely a big factor in terms of how some of these characters' personalities can turn out. So in addition to like, maybe the skill sets that they need, characters need strengths just as much as they need flaws, whether it's like, mental, emotional, or physical. Like you got to have a balance between them. There isn't one or the other. It's a balance of both. So yeah, let's take a look at, some of the characters from the stories that I've been talking about already. Look at, Frodo Baggins from Lord of the Rings. He is he's specifically mentioned to be very motion grab or not. Okay. He's specifically mentioned to be very compassionate and merciful towards others, which is a bit of an emotional strength, as well as having a great deal of bravery for a hobbit, which I see as a mental strength. He is unfortunately quite unskilled in combat due to his size, stature, and upbringing, even if he can pick things up here and there, which is definitely a physical weakness. But he can, like I mentioned, his his compassion, his mercy towards others, but he can be kind to the point of vulnerability that others could easily take advantage of, which is definitely a bit more of like a mental weakness, I think. And then you take somebody like James Holden from The Expanse into play. His family's method of raising him ingrained into him a lot of morality and honor, which is definitely a mental strength, I think. His military training and his experience also serves him well, which is definitely a physical strength. But he can be a bit too idealistic and reckless to the point of unnecessarily endangering himself and or others for what he believes is a just cause, which I see as a bit of like a sort of emotional weakness. Not only that, but he does sometimes tend to have an overly righteous and high and mighty kind of attitude where he thinks he knows best, which is definitely, well, not definitely, but I think I see it as something of like a mental disadvantage. Again, for Genshin Impact, I think I'm going to use Amber as an example. She's going to be a little bit better trying to explain my reasonings. Now, Amber, which again I will use as an example since she's probably a better example than Lumion in this case, but Amber puts a lot of passion and diligence into, her work and into being, an outrider, the last outrider of the Knights of Favonius. She puts a lot of diligence into, like, maintaining that, which is, I think, a little bit more of like an emotional strength, but she's also a very skilled archer, which is most definitely a sort of like physical strength. I say as I get taken out by that guy. Well, not to mention that Amber definitely has a lot of moral high standing, and in part due to the fact that she is an outrider with a lot of encouragement and a figure she can look up to in the form of her grandfather. But she can be a bit of a troublemaker with a bit more pride than is needed, which I see as a bit more of like a mental sort of weakness. Amber's definitely got a little bit more pride than she necessarily needs, and definitely has some immaturity and naivety left to tackle as she definitely continues to, like, grow up and stuff like that. Hunters is pretty easy. Laruk, my protagonist from Hunters, who is surprisingly adaptable, definitely a mental strength of hers, and does have incredible senses, namely her hearing, her smell, and her vision, which is a huge physical advantage for her. Probably one of the few, like, big advantages that she has. Unfortunately, she definitely has a lot of weaknesses, especially towards the beginning of the story, especially with her timidness and, being a little bit weak-willed, which is definitely a bit more of a mental block for her. She's got some low confidence and self-esteem unless it's positively pushed by somebody else, which is definitely an emotional type of issue for her. But again, characters can have strengths and weaknesses of all kinds. It's combining them in the right amounts with the right characters that really makes the difference. I've talked about, all these strengths and weaknesses, like personalities, character, clothing and appearance, and like history and backstories, but there is still one other aspect that I think gets overlooked a little bit. and that's character motivations and goals. You know, it's like whatever your character is doing, it's there's got to be something or some things that they work towards throughout the story, like just like normal people do every day. Like my goal at the moment is to continue making content so that I can because being a content creator, but also looking for a job. Like those are kind of my goals right now, and sometimes they can change, but sometimes they can last you for a while. Goals drive forward not just the characters, but even the stories, depending on the character's importance. This is especially true of protagonists. Could be large or small, regardless of character importance, though. And motivations and goals are typically either intrinsic or external. Intrinsic goals typically involve like personal growth, often emotional, mental, or spiritual growth of some kind. Intrinsic goals are driven by the characters themselves and their own values, their own passions, and desires. External goals, which tend to be more common, involve external factors, which, seems obvious enough, but there's a little bit more to it than that. The external factors typically involve other characters or the world itself. They are often tied to external validation or recognition, not always, but kind of often, or sometimes even just simple rewards and value from others. Some characters can even have multiple goals or a single goal that could be construed as both intrinsic and external. Let's use our well-known examples as we have been for this video. Frodo Baggins from Lord of the Rings. His goal is simple, but it is also massive to the story. It's to destroy the One Ring and save Middle-earth by bringing it to Mordor to destroy it. Mostly, though, his goal is focused on simply just saving the Shire. Like that's his big thing. I'd call it an external goal with some like internal notes of sorts. Now, I suppose there are some intrinsic aspects to it, but it's primarily external because its necessity is dictated primarily by outside events. Again, even if he does have personal motivations for completing this goal. For the Expanse, James Holden's goals and motivation, they kind of change with each installment, season being released, depending on what the threat is at the time. Ultimately, though, James Holden does seem to be primarily of the mindset that, there should be some kind of equality or like peace between the Earthers, the Martians, and the Belters. Belters are basically people who don't reside or who were born on Earth or Mars. But ensuring that everybody has access to resources and information so that humanity can keep going without all the senseless conflict and violence that just keeps happening over and over again, regardless of the threat. That said, like, doing something quite that big is actually, I would consider to be more of an external goal, with some intrinsic notes depending on how the goals line up with his moral compass at the time. Genshin Impact is a really easy one. Lumine's main motivation in the story is to find her lost brother by means of exploration, information gathering, and growing her own elemental capabilities to do so. Now, a lot of people would call this intrinsic, but I would classify it more as an external goal because, while she does have her own desires, she doesn't necessarily have a particular desire to, grow spiritually or anything like that. She has a desire to locate an external factor, her brother, essentially, because she can only achieve that goal through interaction with outside forces, whether that's fighting evil or having other people help her in her search, kind of thing. Hunters is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Her main drive to joining the primary pack that's involved with the story. I may not make it. I need to be very careful. But Larouk's main drive to joining the pack is to learn about survival, learn how to be a real wolf that can manage on her own. She does also later develop some curiosities in learning more about the packs, history, more about its members and stuff like that. These goals are primarily intrinsic. She's intending to grow and learn, and just expand more with herself and her being. These goals are definitely primarily intrinsic with some external notes, sort of. While she does require the help of others in order to learn and grow, she has her own intrinsic desire to learn and grow, to become stronger. to discover, discover her inner strength, frankly. It's very common for characters to have external goals. Intrinsic ones are sometimes a bit harder to kind of figure out with characters. I kind of will briefly mention another like very well-known character. Sherlock Holmes can be readily defined as having intrinsic goals because, like, you know, his primary motivation for solving crimes is simply an inherent desire for knowledge and the internal satisfaction of solving mysteries. Like, that is very clearly an intrinsic goal. So, like, those are the primary things I think of whenever I think of, you know, trying to create new characters and stuff like that. But there's a little more to it than that, because it's like the importance of the character is also, well, obviously very important. But there are different roles that need to be fulfilled by different characters, and sometimes require different amounts of development. So that begs the question, what types of character roles are there? Well, the obvious one is the protagonists, which are also referred to as the main characters. They are the primary narrator of sorts. Ooh, that's an animalculus. So, like, yeah, protagonists are like the kind of narrator of the story, regardless of the perspective. They're most commonly heroes. They can sometimes be neutral characters or villains or anti-heroes or everything in between, but some kind of hero is most definitely the most common. Also, in addition, like, you know, the character arc of the protagonist is typically what serves as like the big backbone of the story. Many stories typically just have one, but some stories can have more than that, you know, just one protagonist. Again, one is very common, but, you know, two is also, it does happen sometimes. Anything more than that, very uncommon and very difficult to do. In terms of Lord of the Rings, I would definitely consider, like, Frodo Baggins and even Aragorn to be, like, the main protagonists of the story. In terms of The Expanse, James Holden is definitely a protagonist, but it also has a couple of other protagonists as well, in the form of Detective Miller, at least for the first, like, half of the series, part of the series, something like that, and Christian Avasarala. Sounds like a crazy name. It definitely is given her character, but it's still a very cool name. I'm just saying. For Genshin Impact, pretty simple. It's either Lumion or Aether, whichever traveler character you're playing as. And for my comic hunters, that answer is obvious as well. The primary protagonist is Larook. Characters that are probably the second most important, or one of the second most important characters, I would say, to the protagonist are known as the deuteragonists. These are secondary characters that are close to and provide some kind of support for the protagonist. Wrong one again. Come on. Alright, gotta wait a few more seconds. Sometimes these characters and their journeys are not necessarily tied to the central plot, but this is not always the case. And deuteragonists can come in a wide variety of, you know, character-like archetypes of sorts. Deuteragonists can come in the form of, like, you know, love interests or guides, confidants, best friends, sidekicks. Like, again, the possibility in terms of the type of deuteragonist that you can get is kind of endless. For Lord of the Rings, deuteragonists are, I think, obviously Samwise Gamgee and Gandalf. The Expanse would definitely be Naomi Nagata. I think Amos, I want to say Burton. That may not, I may be misremembering his name, but he is definitely a deuteragonist as well as Bobby Draper. In terms of Genshin Impact, I mean, I don't really know who the deuteragonist is exactly, but my assumption would be like a combination of, like, Paimon and Amber would probably be like the primary, like, deuteragonist, I guess you could say. Again, it's hard to say, there are just so many freaking characters in this. In terms of the Hunters universe, I would consider Seldred and Nisha, and probably Diala as well, to be important deuteragonists. Which, again, with deuteragonists, you can have multiple. Like, that's not exactly unheard of. 2, maybe 3 is pretty common. But yeah, now we get into the tertiary characters, where things get, like, you know, a little more interesting. Tertiary characters, if people don't know, are kind of more of minor characters that their primary purpose in the story is they're usually there in limited spaces of time. but they're often there to help further explore the world or the story or the protagonist. They're often static characters that don't undergo too much change themselves, but can sometimes be moldable and dynamic characters. In The Expanse, I would probably consider Kamina Drummer and Clarissa Mao to be the most prominent like tertiary characters, probably in addition to like Fred Johnson as well. In Genshin Impact, I'd definitely put Jean, Lisa, and Kaya as the most prominent tertiary characters. In Hunters, I'd probably say Nylon, Idretto, and Alina are probably going to be. I'd say another prominent character that I should definitely mention as well, who's probably just about as important as the deuteragonist, if not more important, is the antagonist. So the antagonists, they are characters whose purpose or objective, it's not to oppose the protagonist specifically, but their purpose or objective directly hinders that of the protagonist. They're not necessarily always intentionally standing in the way of the protagonist, but sometimes they will, but not always. Also, something to keep in mind is that just because, a character is an antagonist, that does not necessarily mean it's synonymous with a villain, although that can often be the case. That is not always the case. Since villains and anti-heroes and stuff can technically function as protagonists themselves, an antagonist is not strictly a villain. So, something to keep in mind. Some antagonists may also serve as what's known as foil characters. They're characters that are considered to be like polar opposites of the protagonist and often allow the viewer to explore the protagonist a bit further. Antagonists can sometimes even be purely conceptual as opposed to actual characters or individuals or entities. This is a bit more rare though. But Lord of the Rings, Sauron and Saruman are definitely the primary antagonists of the story. For The Expanse, Jules Pierre Mao and Marco Inaros are definitely the big antagonists of the story. For Genshin Impact, I feel like that's pretty obvious. The monsters that I was just fighting, heck. The Abyss Order and the Unknown God who took our brother, those are definitely the primary antagonists of this. For Hunters, the antagonists, I'll be honest, I won't exactly reveal that because, that's a bit of a spoiler. I haven't really drawn that part of the story yet. I've got it under concept and stuff like that, but I haven't actually drawn it yet. But there's also a bit of, I would say that there's actual antagonists, but even some conceptual ones as well, namely related to trauma. And what kind of trauma that is, it's kind of various degrees of and types of trauma, but that's definitely a very prominent antagonist from that comic. Something else that I think is important to consider with relation to characters in general is the character arc, which no story is really complete without one. So yeah, the character arc is definitely a very important part of any story, because no story is complete without one. Character arcs are prominent particularly for protagonists, because the character arc is essentially a change that a character experiences throughout the story, whether it's driven by internal and or external influence. Even deuteragonists and antagonists and supporting characters, if they are considered dynamic, that is, can undergo character arcs as well. Static characters typically don't see these kinds of changes. There are some uncommon occasions where the intention for an important character is to not have an arc, but simply to tell an exciting story. Think of characters say Indiana Jones or James Bond. Those kinds of characters fall into that category. The purpose is not to have a character arc. It's not to grow and develop. It's simply to tell a story, which is something a lot of people will do, but I find that those characters aren't quite as interesting. Not to say that they aren't interesting, period, but they're not quite as interesting. Character arcs are, when they're developed, they're primarily seen as positive. They, with individuals growing and learning and rising above what they started at, whether it's, a lot of growth or just a little bit of growth. But it can also be a bit negative too, with, individuals that spiral down into something that destroys them, maybe physically, mentally, maybe even both. I can't even do that. Wait, no, actually, I think I can. I just haven't really unlocked that area yet. So if, I follow this path, theoretically, I should be able to get there, right? If I follow the beach, rather. In any case, character arcs are, in my opinion, and probably in the opinion of some other authors as well, character arcs are like an important part of it. They're kind of sometimes can be a beating heart of the story, and they should be focused on the hardest for your story, for its characters, to be compelling to readers. Character arcs do work best when they are, properly established. They have obstacles associated with them. They introduce new characters and bonds important to them, and they have like, satisfying conclusions, whether they're positive or negative. Because yes, some satisfying conclusions can be negative. It does happen. And there are plenty of common archetypes, archetypes that can come with various characters and stories and whatnot. There's like the reluctant hero. Think of like, Percy Jackson and the Hunger Games. Rise to Redemption is also another common character archetype. Think of like, Les Miserables or even Red Dead Redemption, the first one or the second one. Humanizing a villain is also an archetype out there, like, Maleficent and Loki. Maybe even, it's kind of Deadpool to an extent, but not quite. There's the unlikely friendship. Think of like, Charlotte's Web and The Big Bang Theory. Overcoming challenges. Good Will Hunting is a good example of this. So was like, the Rocky movies. That's new. Oh, what the? Huh. That's new.
Wow, these will come in handy.
Well, if I'm exploring new territory, of course I'm gonna experience new, like, puzzles and stuff like that. Makes sense. Aliens Among Us is, like, another, like, archetype that happens a bit out there. Just look at, like, E.T. or, like, the TV series Resident Alien. In any case, the character arcs they're often tied into the themes of the story in some form. For Lord of the Rings, the idea of like fate versus free will, as well as power in general, tie in directly into Frodo's journey and growth. Frodo takes his fate upon himself to destroy the ring, but its malice does attempt to ensnare Frodo over the course of the story to proclaim its own fate, which in a way it does. Not to mention that, Frodo being a hobbit and therefore not having that strong desire for power like so many other people, he in a way, he suddenly has all the power in the world, but he doesn't wish to use it if he can help it. Like, that's just not his desire. It's not who he is, and it's not who he wants to be, even if the ring kind of does claim him sort of in the end. The Expanse, in terms of its character arc and themes and whatnot, that series is constantly examining like power and oppression, as well as humanity's pursuit for knowledge and the consequences associated with it, unfortunately. James Holden does primarily seek some kind of like, peace and equality between everyone, but many are oppressors or oppressed that don't want to change the dynamic or feel like they don't have the power to do so. Humanity's pursuit for knowledge, especially in regards to like, the protomolecule, if you watch it, you know what I'm talking about, often clashes with Holden's own beliefs and experience that one can go too far in the pursuit of knowledge. For Genshin Impact, it's a little different because, game formats in general tend to be a little bit different depending on, like, the story they're telling in the game format. But I'd say that there are still hints of this game having themes related to, bonds and connections, and somewhat indirectly at control as well. Sheesh. What the? Oh! It's not an Animoculus, it's a Geoculus! Wait, am I starting to explore like Liyue? I need to get there, I think. Could be a statue of the Seven. But yeah, there are certainly a lot of hints in this game about, bonds and connections and kind of control as well. There are multiple characters, including like, Paimon, Jean, Amber, and Venti, that talk about trusting and relying on others and finding yourself through connection with others. Being an open world game, the player has a ton of autonomy and control into where they explore, who they talk to, what enemies they face, etc., etc. While there's certainly a lot of talk about, trusting and relying on others and connections and stuff like that, it still simultaneously feels as though the playable characters are being strung along by outside forces, whether they be monsters or gods or even other humans. My story Hunters is it primarily serves as a coming of age story, which is not exactly uncommon, especially with, younger or youngish characters. The primary themes are definitely centered around like identity, bonds, and trauma. Relationships within the pack are strained or even fractured. They're not even caused by or related to Laruk in a lot of cases.
No stone unturned.
Having been abandoned, Laruk definitely she struggles to understand what her identity even is and does need the help of others to discover it and to forge bonds with the others and to hopefully one day understand their history and their trauma.
Cool it.
Right. Yep. Ah, here we go. Now we're starting to open up leeway. Huh. Well then. I can worship the statue. I'm just gonna offer all. Oh, I still need one more Geoculus. Fine.
Did you just feel the power of Geo?
Did I?
Your connection to the elements is so different from the Vision Bearers. Seems like you can physically switch between elements. If
I can?
so, then you just need to make an offering to a statue of the Seven, and the elements will respond, just like they did in Mondstadt. We're now in Liyue, which is ruled over by the Geo Archon. That's why the statues here look a bit different.
I did notice that.
If you ever miss using your animal powers, you can just get them back from a statue of the Seven in Mondstadt.
Wait. Resonate with Geo with the statue of the Seven in Leeway to convert your element to Geo and acquire Geo elemental skill and an element to burst. Return to the statue of the Seven in Mondstadt and resonate with Animo to reacquire animal ability. Oh. Resonate with Geo? Whoa. Okay. Damn, okay. So I think in terms of characters, it all kind of comes down to this, is how many do you actually need for like every character and whatnot? Well, it depends on the character's importance to the goal of the story, I think, in large part. Worship statue, please. Overall. Ah, max stamina increased again. Heck yeah. So yeah, depends on the character's like importance to the story. Every protagonist should have some thought put into their character, their background, plot relevance, etc. A lot of deuteragonists and antagonists also typically need a lot of these. Tertiary characters and a lot of side characters may need this, but probably not as much. But it's important to remember that every character is different. You should still try and think of them as like real people who deserve grounded personalities and histories that may need some kind of growth, just like everyone out there in the real world. But when it comes to character creation, at the end, you just have to remember to experiment and have fun. Creating characters can be tough and exhausting sometimes. Trust me, I know. I have well over 1,000. That's not even an exaggeration. I've counted. But there's also a lot of joy in discovering or like changing aspects to your character that manage to, just fit in like perfectly sized gears. I can confirm that has happened to me multiple times. Now that I've discovered an entirely new area that I can explore, that opens up a world of possibility for me to gain a lot more EXP so that I can level up, so that I can actually take the official Liyue quests. I think I need to be level 24 or something like that. This video ended up taking a lot longer than intended. I feel like that just kind of happens nowadays. But I got a little bit entranced by a couple of the big crazy battles, but I have Geo now. I'm not the level I need to be to do some official Liyue story quests, but I am able to actually start exploring it now. So neat. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna end it there after this very long period of time. Thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And as usual, until the next video, guys, check you later. I hope you guys were able to learn a bunch of stuff about, writing and whatnot. I hope I made sense. Check you later.